Hey friends, if you are looking for a cozy soup, you have come to the right place. Today we are going to make a delicious butternut squash soup. This soup is so cozy, so comforting. It is perfect for fall and winter when you have the lovely butternut squashes at your grocery store. Butternut squash is a really great ingredient to use. It is full of vitamins, so we are going to make a nice simple soup. This is completely dairy-free and gluten-free too. First, what we're going to do is preheat our oven to 400 degrees because we are going to peel the butternut squash and then we are going to roast it in the oven. From there, we'll use an immersion blender to get it nice and creamy, and we'll add in some extra ingredients, and then we will have our soup. Let's go ahead and get started because I am hungry and I want some dinner. Also, this is a perfect soup if you want to meal prep because it heats up really, really nicely and you can store it in the fridge. I'm going to tell you what you need and then what's optional. So the butternut squash you need, definitely an olive oil. I highly recommend olive oil. I think it really adds to the taste. Then you'll need some broth. You can use either chicken or veggie broth. I am going to use chicken broth, and we have some homemade bone broth, so I'll put a little bit of that in it too. I like adding a few cloves of garlic to it. I would also recommend, if you have an onion, adding a few pieces of onion, like a sweet yellow onion, to the pan with the butternut squash. We really like cipollini onions, for example. I think that gives it a really nice flavor. I will be using some onion powder today instead. That is really everything that you need. Optionally, you can also add a big carrot on the pan, or you could add a small sweet potato. I like to use truffle salt. This is optional as well. You can just use sea salt. And then you can add any herbs that you like. For example, I like to add a little oregano or thyme or rosemary. In all simplicity, you really just need the squash, the oil, the broth, and maybe a couple spices. Let's get started. We're going to peel this up and chop it. The butternut squash is in the oven, so we have that baking and roasting with the garlic cloves. And that is going to be in there for around 30 minutes. We want it to where we can put a fork easily through the butternut squash, and it should be like a light golden brown. While we're waiting for that to be done, I've gotten out a large pot. The key here is we want it to be pretty tall because that was a big butternut squash. That was probably the biggest one I have ever used. Once it's done baking, we are going to put it in this pot, and then we are going to use an immersion blender to blend it up. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can also use a normal blender or a food processor. However, I highly recommend an immersion blender. It is so nice. We use this thing all the time for things like sauces or dressings or soups, and it's just like so nice not to dirty the whole blender, and this is a lot easier to clean. I will link this down below. Once it's on the stove, I'm going to add a little bit more spices, so probably some more salt or truffle salt. I will add the oregano then too, and then we'll do the broth. If you want it to be really, really creamy, you can add like some canned coconut milk or some almond or cashew milk. Just make sure it is not sweetened and it's not a vanilla flavor. But honestly, we don't really do that because it's creamy enough as it is. Okay, so I will see you in about 30 minutes when this is done baking, and we'll move on to the next step. The butternut squash is done and it's nice and soft. We could let it crisp up a little bit more or even broil it for like a minute just to get it more brown, but I am hungry. We'll take out the pan and let it cool for a bit. I think it's nice to let it cool so it's not steaming hot when you're trying to use the blender or immersion blender and you don't accidentally burn yourself on the butternut squash or the steam. Let's let it cool for probably 5-10 minutes and then we're going to start making the soup. I do, however, want the garlic on there a little bit crispier, so I'm gonna throw that into this pot first with some olive oil, and we are going to crisp it up. Now that the butternut squash has cooled, we are going to add it to the pan. Make sure you add like a tablespoon or so of olive oil to the bottom of the pan because you don't want it to stick. Then we are going to add like 3 or 4 cups of chicken broth or veggie broth, bone broth, whatever you have. That is going to help us blend it up and help with the consistency. Use some spices, we'll give it a taste and see what it needs. Let's start with 3 cups first. We're gonna use the immersion blender and blend this up, and then we can always add more if we want it to be a little less thick. This is perfect. Look at that texture. Looks so good. If you're using a smaller butternut squash, maybe start with like 2 cups or so of chicken broth. If you're using a big one like me, 3 cups. And if you're also adding in sweet potato or carrots, you might need up to like 4 cups. This is the consistency I like it. If you want it a bit thinner or thicker, just adjust the broth. And now the last thing that we're going to do, because we put in some cold broth, we are going to heat the soup up. I put that on the stove. We have it going over medium heat. We're gonna do a taste test and see what it needs. I just added a little bit more salt and pepper to it because this is a lot of soup, so it definitely needs that. Let's see. Very, very good. Definitely is going to need a little more salt. Truffle salt would be really good if you have truffle salt. We'll add the oregano now, probably like a teaspoon of oregano. This is a lot of soup. If you have thyme, that's really good. I'm just out. And then at the end, I want to top it with some dairy-free ricotta and some toasted pumpkin seeds. So let's get those toasting. We are done, and not a second too soon because I am hungry. This is so tasty. So I put some of the dairy-free ricotta on top. I put some toasted pumpkin seeds, drizzled some really high quality olive oil, and it looks delicious. We are also making some gluten-free chicken sandwiches to have with this for dinner, and we have leftovers tomorrow for lunch too, so it is perfect. I hope that you enjoy this recipe as much as I do. It is such a good cozy soup staple. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already so that you don't miss out on any of my new videos. Please share this video with a friend. It really, really helps out my channel. I can't wait to see you in my next one. Bye guys.